This leafy autumnal scene is in the heart of West London. It's our first stop as we explore the King's Road and more significantly the streets and squares bordering it. As we slowly pan round this lovely residential square, in many ways it reflects this walk. In the distance you can see the hustle and bustle of the King's Road, but very quickly if you step away from the traffic and shops of the High Street, you can find yourself in some peaceful, charming residential areas packed with exclusive properties which have attracted the rich and famous for centuries, from Henry VIII to, dare I say it, made in Chelsea celebs. Now, despite the fact that the main road that runs through the area is called the King's Road, and that Henry VIII had a residence on the banks of the Thames here, we won't be focusing on historical royalty, although we will touch on some current royals. Neither will we be seeking out the haunts of Ollie, Miles, Tabitha or Yasmin, who, if you're not quite sure, are stars of Made in Chelsea, although it is inevitable that they will get a mention somewhere. No, we're going to concentrate on the period from when the King's Road and Chelsea was the heart of the swinging 60s, when London really was the place to be and the King's Road was the place to be seen, through to the 80s when the punk phenomenon put the area back in the spotlight. It's a good 4-mile round walk on level ground, but you'll never be far away from the King's Road and a bus back to Sloane Square, which is our starting point. We're in Royal Avenue now, which is about a 10-minute walk along the King's Road from Sloane Square Underground Station. Chelsea isn't particularly well served by the rail network, but Sloane Square is on the Circle and District line, so it seems a good place to start. When you leave the station, you'll see Sloane Square and then the King's Road. If you stay on the left-hand side, you'll come to 49 King's Road on the corner of Royal Avenue. The what three words are Manage, Edges, Roses. This building, which at the time of filming was looking very sorry for itself, in its last incarnation was a McDonald's. I don't know what its future is, but hopefully it's an upgrade on McDonald's. Sadly, it'll be a bit of a recurring theme this today, premises that were once thriving shops which are now fast food outlets. This particular building was once a large Victorian pub. You can see the original architecture on the upper floors, but it came to fame when it's remodelled and relaunched in 1968 as a Chelsea drugstore. It was given an ultra-modern facade of stone, aluminium and glass. The stonework's still there. It was effectively a mini shopping mall with shops and bars spread over 3 floors, including of course a pharmacy. It was initially very successful after some serious marketing, and it reached the nation's consciousness when it featured in the film Clockwork Orange. And it was also referenced in the Rolling Stones song You Can't Always Get What You Want. It might surprise you to know that that was originally a B-side. The Stones will also be a recurring theme. The band have had long connections to the area, with most of the original band members living in Chelsea at one time or another. In fact, Bill Wyman still does. OK, we're going to leave the King's Road now onto Royal Avenue, only a matter of metres to number 4. Now, I've described this as a baby boomer walk. The previous owner of this house will be a familiar name to boomers both sides of the Atlantic. Her career has spanned an amazing 85 years, and up until recently she was still performing in the West End. For close on 20 years up until 1998, when she downsized to another house in Chelsea, this was the London home of Pet Clarke. We're going to continue along Royal Avenue, which was originally intended as access to the Royal Hospital, which you'll see in the distance. The word hospital is misleading, as we use the word differently to how it was used 350 years ago when it was constructed as accommodation for retired soldiers. This is still how it's used today. You probably know these residents as Chelsea pensioners. If you're interested, you can book a guided tour of the historic buildings. We're going to turn right at the end of the avenue. Now, our walk is as straightforward as possible, but there will be some meandering. I'm not going to literally give you a step-by-step directions, but I will give you plenty of what three words waypoints. Don't worry, I won't abandon you. Now, there's a danger you can start to feel this is just a film of front doors. I don't claim to be Spielberg, but I do promise to try harder with my cinematic skills. However, as I always say, there's a story behind every front door. Number 18 Redburn Street is a pretty ordinary terraced house, albeit in Chelsea. The what three words are Pauled, Singer, Often. Behind this front door lived one of the most famous showbiz families of the 80s and 90s. To be honest, I don't think it's the same front door, but the principle's there. It's the one on the right. Bob Geldof and Paula Yates lived here until their separation in 1995. All four of Paula's children lived here. The family history is full of stories of affairs, debts, drug abuse and ultimately tragedy. Much of which happened while this was the Geldof's London home. It concluded with Bob moving out and Michael Hutchins of INXS moving in. The details I'll leave for you to check out. We're going to retrace our steps just a little to Tedworth Square. On the right hand side you'll come to Tite Street. We're going to go down here, but just a quick mention of the house in the opposite corner. Mark Twain stayed here. The house has a blue plaque on it, but he was only there a matter of months. He spent this period mourning the death of his 24-year-old daughter Susie. It was a reclusive time for him, but he did say he loved the area. As we walk down Tite Street, the first street you cross is Christchurch Street. And if you glance down to your right, you will see a corner pub, which is called The Surprise. It's 170 years old, in a lovely setting tucked away in a residential street. You might feel you're ready for a rest and take the weight off your feet, but I'm going to continue for a while before my first pub visit. Well, I did say I'd try and show you something other than front doors. On a serious note, in the event that you're feeling a little bit nostalgic for the good old days, when the music was better, the roads were quieter, and the UK was a safe, carefree country, I'm just going to burst your bubble a little. In 1974, the country, and in particular London, was in the grip of a bombing campaign by the IRA. On the 27th of November, a small bomb exploded in a postbox in Tite Street. A second larger bomb, planted in a nearby hedge, exploded shortly after, injuring 20 people, mainly members of the emergency services responding to the first bomb. It was packed with nails. Now, we're on the junction of Tite Street and Royal Hospital Road. I'm going to continue along Tite Street to take a look at two more homes. One of them doesn't have a direct connection to the boomer era, but I feel its historical and cultural significance means it's worth a look. The other one I doubt you'll find on any walking tours of Chelsea, but fits nicely into the greater context of who we're looking at today. However, this is a good 4-mile walk, and if you wish to knock 15 minutes off it, then you can head down Royal Hospital Road to Cheney Walk, and I'll meet you at number 3. On the way, you'll pass Gordon Ramsay's flagship restaurant. Tite Street has been a major draw to the artistic community since it first developed 150 years ago. Early residents included the American artist James Whistler and author Oscar Wilde, and we just mentioned Mark Twain, another American who visited our shores. His real name was Samuel Clemens. And it's possible they'd all pop into a local hostelry, maybe the Surprise, have a few pints of best bitter and discuss what their latest projects are. I can just hear it now. Oscar Wilde saying to Whistler, "James, what are you painting?" And him saying, "Well, I haven't got a lot of work on at the moment, so I'm just painting my mum." And maybe Mark Twain would say, "Well, I'm doing a lecture tour to pay off my debts. Just talking about the good old days of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer." And Wilde would chip in, "Well, I'm writing a book about a man keeping a portrait of himself in the attic. I think I might call him Dorian Gray." And Bram Stoker might join them. He only lived round the corner. He might just say, "Well, I'm writing a book about a bloke with fangs and a cape." I can only guess what the rest of them would say. They'd say, "It will never catch on." I know, it's a bit flippant, but I hope that's just given you a sense of the calibre of people who've made this small area of London such a magnet for the artistic and literary community, including from across the Atlantic. Across the road you'll see a row of houses, 3 of which have blue plaques, just reinforcing this point. We're here to talk about the one in the middle, number 34. Oscar Wilde bought this house when he married Constance in 1884, and for 10 years life for the Wildes looked good. They had 2 sons and Oscar's career was blooming. He wrote some of his most successful work in the ground floor front room. Lady Windermere's Fan, picture of Dorian Gray and the importance of being earnest. Now, as significant as Oscar Wilde is to our literary heritage, I want to bring your attention to the last 5 years of his life, because what happened to Wilde in 1895 had repercussions for gay men for over a century. He was prosecuted under a law that was introduced in 1885 and only completely repealed in 2003. He was convicted of gross indecency, an offence that included any sexual act between two men. There wasn't an equivalent offence for women. He served 2 years hard labour and never returned to Chelsea. He spent the remaining years of his life in Paris, where they had more liberal laws and attitudes. He died in 1900 and buried in a pauper's grave, having been declared bankrupt. He now has a more impressive tomb after a fundraising campaign. The high-profile trial, sentence and interpretation of the law put gay men firmly in a closet for generations. Nowadays, thankfully, we live in a different world. His play The Importance of Being Earnest was being performed to rave reviews in the West End 130 years after it was cancelled after just 86 performances due to the public scandal. As we carry on down the street, on the left-hand side we come to number 33. It's been a bit of a hub for American artists since James Whistler had it built as art studios. Among them was John Nelson Shanks. Diana, Princess of Wales, and Margaret Thatcher both attended sittings here for Shanks's portraits. When we get to the end of the street, we'll turn right onto Chelsea Embankment and head towards Cheyne Walk. It's a busy road, but you'll get your first view of the River Thames and a good vantage point to see the Buddhist Peace Pagoda in Battersea Park on the opposite riverbank. However, before we go any further, a quick mention for Anita Pallenberg, who spent much of her life in the area, and specifically Tite Street. This building on the left, River House, was one of her addresses in the years after she separated from Keith Richards. She was with Keith for 13 years and had 3 children, but she struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. She lived her final years in Worthing, Sussex, and died in 2017. Keith Richards attended her funeral. Okay, more about Keith and Anita next when we get to Cheyne Walk. The first stretch is set back behind some public gardens and generally the most desirable part. There are at least 10 blue plaques and possibly more, and any walking tour of Chelsea is almost certainly going to take in Cheyne Walk. And the first house we'll stop at will certainly feature. We're outside number 3. The what 3 words are drill, dine, live. It's the one set back with the windows open. Now this is a house that if the walls could talk would have a few tales to tell. It's well documented that Keith Richards and Anita Pallenberg lived here. It was their London home from 1967 until 1980 when the pair split. During that period, Anita and Keith had their 3 children. The Stones were in their prime and drugs were part of their lives. Number 3 was raided by the police more than once. The Rockstar connection doesn't end there. Earlier when I was talking about 18 Redburn Street, I said that Michael Hutchins moved into the house and Bob Geldof moved out. This was as a result of the divorce settlement in which the pair swapped houses. This is the other house that they swapped. It was an odd arrangement which I don't pretend to understand. Hutchins didn't own the house, just had access to it, and consequently neither did Geldof, but it seemed to suit all parties and it allowed Paula Yates to bring up her children in the family home, including Tiger Lily, whose father was Michael Hutchins. Sadly, as we know, there was tragedy not too far away in the future. We're outside number 27 now, and we've gone past a number of houses which have had famous or important residents. But it'll be dark by the time we get back to Sloane Square if we talk about each one. I will just say among them are a previous New York mayor, the author of Middlemarch, a former Prime Minister, and where Gerald Scarfe and his wife Jane Asher still live to the best of my knowledge. The couple have been married for over 40 years. The famous cartoonist and illustrator is possibly best known for his artwork on Pink Floyd's album The Wall. Jane Asher is a successful actress, author and baker, but many will remember her for being Paul McCartney's partner in the 1960s. This row of houses are all impressive and individual, but number 16 is particularly so. John Paul Getty II is a previous owner. Number 23 is owned by ex-England international footballer Sol Campbell. We'll take a slightly longer look at number 27, although unless you include the Hammer horror films of the 60s, it doesn't fit into the boomer criteria. Bram Stoker lived here with his wife, son, younger brother and 3 servants. I can only assume the house is a lot bigger than it looks. In truth, it's not the most significant home of his. He lived here before his Gothic literature made him famous. He was 50 when Dracula was published. By that time, he was living in 18 St Leonard's Terrace. In hindsight, I should have pointed it out when we went past it earlier. You probably noticed it. The blue plaque is very prominent. I'm just pointing this one out because the house is such a curiosity. We're on the corner of Oakley Street. We're not crossing over, we're going to turn up here. We're leaving behind Cheyne Walk and the River Thames for a while. The bridge, which you will have noticed and can just see in the distance now, is the Albert Bridge. It's the second oldest surviving bridge over the Thames in London. It is creaking a bit now, but to be honest, it always had structural issues, which this sign is evidence of. It's lit with over 4,000 LED lights and looks fantastic at night. The house we're stood outside of is 42 Oakley Street. I feel it's safe to call a man who lived here for only a matter of months in 1977 as iconic. His name is Bob Marley. Despite the fact that he and his band were only here for a short time, it was a significant period. Without wishing to spoil any illusions that Bob's songs were all recorded in some palm tree shaded studio in Montego Bay with the sound of cicadas in the distance, much the same as you might think the Eagles' album Desperado with classics like Tequila Sunrise would have been recorded in California, the album Exodus, just as Desperado was largely recorded in London. Jamming, Waiting in Vain and Three Little Birds were all recorded here. The last one has been adopted by football fans of Ajax and Liverpool, which I would imagine would have pleased Bob. He loved his football and in the morning would go with the Wailers over the Albert Bridge to play football in Battersea Park before going to the recording studio in the afternoon. The album, and therefore the time spent in his house, proved to be a defining period in his career. Exodus was named as the best album of the 20th century in Time magazine. If you're anything like me, you'll be ready for a pint by now. Don't worry, there's a pub literally a minute away around the corner. It's dead easy to find, but I will give you a what 3 words to keep you on track. They are rope, clash, transmitted. The pub and beer garden are very different to how I knew it 40 odd years ago. If you're hoping for a pub with lots of original fixtures and fittings, with cod and chips on the menu, you'll really struggle in Chelsea. But the truth is, these pubs in residential streets around here have been seen as prime residential land and subject to attempts for a change to housing. To survive, they've had to evolve and cater for today's clientele. The Feeney had a fight for survival back in 2012 when the locals fought a court battle to stop it being converted into a house. Amongst the high-profile signatories were Hugh Grant, Sol Campbell and Mark Knopfler. But for me, the most famous regular customer is the great George Best. I'm trying to resist hyperbole, but particularly for people of my generation, some of the residents who have lived within a 5-minute walk of this pub have been true superstars. According to legend, George would sit at the table just inside the door on the right. Customers would buy him a glass of wine and have their photo taken with him. Alex Hurricane Higgins was known to join him on occasion. Just imagine that. On this most recent visit, the pub was thriving. Whereas back in the 90s, George Best's famous patronage boosted business, nowadays it's made in Chelsea. The pub has featured considerably. So I believe. Obviously I've never seen it. Seriously though, it has a nice beer garden and on a summer's day it's worth a visit. Which is something this man did while I was here. He arrived on his penny farthing, chained it to a lamppost and went in for a pint. Half an hour later he was helped up on his bike by the doorman and off he went. Now for any overseas viewers who might be wondering, this isn't normal form of transport in the UK. We're returning to Oakley Street and continuing up a little bit further to 2 more houses on the opposite side of the street. The numbers are 87 and 89. In the UK we would generally expect them to be next to each other because even numbers are on one side and odd numbers on the other. But in Oakley Street they aren't. Consequently, number 88 separates the 2. 87 was the home of Lady Wilde until her death in 1896. she was buried in a pauper's grave, the same as her eldest son, Oscar. He spent some months here before his libel case and trial, which resulted in his imprisonment. Nearly 90 years later, George Best made it his home in 1984, after he retired. You'll appreciate how close it is to the Feeney, and consequently what a draw it must have been for an acknowledged alcoholic. He lived here for about 15 years. There's a blue plaque on the property for Lady Jane Wilde, but not for George Best. There are literally hundreds of organisations who fit plaques in this country. The oldest and most famous is now run by English Heritage, and I don't understand the criteria. I understand that some homeowners don't want them on their homes, but sometimes the logic defies me. Number 89 doesn't have a plaque either, although the owner of this house in the mid-70s has 7 plaques around London, plus, bizarrely, one on Stockport railway station commemorating the fact that he slept on the station platform one night. Incidentally, there's not a plaque on the house. As far as I know, it's the only property he ever owned in less than 4 miles away. He moved to Berlin around 1976. This was a very important period in his career. I make no apology for stressing the significance of this street and immediate neighbouring area in modern Western culture. Within sight of this house you can see the house where Bob Marley would walk out the door to go and record Exodus. 1973, Aladdin Sane was released, and Bowie was in the middle of his Ziggy Stardust tour. Amongst the singles released in 1973 was Jagger's and Richards' song Let's Spend a Night Together, which according to legend, Jagger and Bowie took literally. It's in this house that Angie is supposed to have caught them in bed together, apparently having a sleepover. We're going to retrace our steps a bit back down Oakley Street, taking the first road on the right. This is Upper Cheney Row. I thought I'd film as I walk down here just to give you a bit of a feel of what some of the back streets of Chelsea are like. They can have a bit of a village feel about them. As you can imagine, you have to be very wealthy to live around here nowadays. Bankers, lawyers and business owners dominate. James Dyson lived down here. But the one that interested me is Bill Wyman. I know, just when you're thinking it doesn't get any bigger than George Best and David Bowie, we have the original bass player from probably the best rock band ever. And what's more, he still lives here. Bill has called Upper Cheney Row his home for over 30 years now. He bought the house with the money he received when he left the band. The fact that he still lives here means I won't point the house out. He does own property in Suffolk, but Bill has a strong affinity with Chelsea. He's a successful author now and has written a book on the area called Chelsea, From Medieval Village to Cultural Capital. We're going to turn left onto Cheney Row and back onto Cheney Walk. We're going to be wandering a bit now. There are certain places I don't want to miss out, but I will keep you on track with what 3 words. None of them are far apart, generally only a few minutes. We'll be turning right onto Cheney Walk, but a few steps to our left will put us outside number 48. The what 3 words are Powers, Winner, Each. We really are deep in Rolling Stones territory now. Mick Jagger bought this house in 1968 and moved in with his partner Marianne Faithfull. This is shortly after Keith and Anita moved in 5 minutes away at number 3. Anita and Marianne were good friends. They shared a mutual addiction to drugs. By 1970, Mick and Marianne's 6-year relationship had run its course, and much like Keith and Anita, they remained friends until her death. In 1971, Mick and Keith became tax exiles in France. OK, we're going to continue along Cheney Walk, past this upmarket restaurant and this imposing set of apartments, which was Ian Fleming's London home in the early 50s, when his first James Bond novel, Casino Royale, was published. We're leaving Cheney Walk again as soon as we've passed Carlisle Mansions. I'm taking you this way because I want to show you a little bit more of the back streets of Chelsea, and we do go past another pub. The Cross Keys was built in 1708 and is the oldest pub in Chelsea. You could do a decent pub crawl around here without touching the King's Road. The Cooper's Arms isn't far away as well. I'm not calling in here on this occasion, but feel free to sample their hospitality, as the names on this plaque have done in the past. It's unusual for a pub to advertise its previous customers, but it's great for me, saves me doing the research. One name it doesn't mention is Prince Harry, who held his 31st birthday party here in 2015. This pub was also threatened with permanent closure in 2012 by the same property developer who attempted to close the Theeney. His name was Robert Bourne. We'll continue on Lawrence Street and turn left down a passageway called Justice Walk. It's quite quaint and I thought I'd just show you it. Nowadays, like most of Chelsea, it's much sought after housing. You have to be a millionaire to live here. But back in the 19th century, there was a soup kitchen to feed the poor of the area in Justice Walk. In 2024, there was an attempted murder at one of the properties. The victim was a housekeeper. The perpetrator was Maximilian Bourne, who is the nephew of Robert Bourne, the property developer. At the end of the passageway, we find ourselves facing a nondescript apartment block. The what three words are landed, define, mile. I use what three words because it's more precise than a postcode, but if you're new to it, perhaps I should just say that when you enter the three words, you have to put 3 forward slashes in front of the keywords. Oh, sorry, where were we? Oh yes, this nondescript building. In 2002, the parents of Kate, Pippa and James bought a 3-bedroom apartment for their children to use when they're in London. Kate finished university in Edinburgh in 2005 and she lived here with her sister until her marriage to Prince William in 2011. William would visit her here. OK, I'm going to take a break now. We've walked about 2 miles and we've got over 2 miles to complete the walk. So I think this might be a good point for you to make a decision. You can turn right and head on up Old Church Street past a pub called the Pig's Ear, which was once owned by Chelsea Football Club legend Frank Lampard. He has been known to pop in with football and show business friends, including Ed Sheeran. You'll go past Eric Clapton's London property, which is pretty much opposite the pub. If you walk up to the King's Road, you can grab a bus back to Stone Square. There are plenty of them. Or you can walk, which is about a mile. Alternatively, you can continue across the King's Road and meet me on the corner of Mallord Street to pick up on the remainder of the walk. In the second half of my video, I will be turning left back towards the Thames. We'll see where Bryan Adams lived and where the Stones were formed, how fashion transformed the King's Road and a few significant Beatles locations amongst many more. So please subscribe and the second part of this video will be available soon.